I still remember the exact moment everything went sideways because it started with a sound every contractor hates hearing. That little email notification popping up when you're already halfway through lunch. I opened it expecting another routine maintenance request. Maybe a parking gate that needed recalibration or a camera somebody claimed wasn't recording. Instead, the subject line read, "Formal notice of property damage and demand for reimbursement." Before I even finished the first paragraph, my stomach dropped. They were accusing me of causing nearly $5,000 in damage to the executive courtyard, threatening legal action if I didn't pay, and whoever sent it had copied the CEO, Human Resources, the legal department, facilities management, and practically every executive who mattered. In less than 30 seconds, I had gone from being the quiet contractor who kept the parking system running to being the guy everyone believed had smashed up company property. My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm 39 years old. I live outside Nashville, Tennessee, and for almost 7 years I've worked as an independent contractor managing access control, security cameras, license plate readers, and the automated parking systems for one of the largest commercial office campuses in the city. I wasn't an employee, which meant I didn't get invited to holiday parties. Nobody remembered my birthday, and I definitely wasn't part of executive politics. I just showed up before sunrise, fixed what was broken, documented everything, and went home. Honestly, I liked it that way. Being invisible is underrated until someone decides you're the easiest person to blame. The company itself looked like something out of a corporate brochure. Glass buildings reflecting the morning sun, polished stone walkways, fountains that probably cost more than my first house, and an executive parking lot filled with luxury SUVs, German sedans, and shiny electric cars that looked like they had never seen a speck of dust. Meanwhile, I drove a 12-year-old blue Ford Fusion with peeling clear coat, a cracked rear taillight I kept meaning to replace, and enough miles on it that the dashboard looked like a slot machine. Every morning I'd park in the contractor section behind the loading docks where nobody important ever walked. I didn't care. My car got me to work and back. That was enough. Unfortunately, not everyone saw it that way. There was one executive in particular named Brandon Pierce. Well, that's what I'll call him because he's still around somewhere, just not where he used to be. Brandon was the vice president of marketing, the kind of guy who walked through the office talking loudly enough so everyone could hear him, always wearing expensive watches, always carrying coffee. He never seemed to drink, always reminding people how valuable his time was. He drove a pearl light luxury electric sedan that he treated like it belonged in a museum instead of a parking lot. The funny thing was, Brandon acted like he owned the campus, even though he was just another executive collecting a paycheck. He parked wherever he wanted, ignored speed limits inside the garage, and once actually yelled at a security guard because the automatic gate made him wait 6 seconds. 6 seconds. I remember the guard joking later, "I guess billion-dollar ideas can't survive a 6-second delay." We laughed about it, but everyone knew Brandon had a habit of making problems disappear by finding someone else to carry the blame. I just never imagined that someone would eventually be me. The email included several photos of a decorative concrete planter near the executive entrance. The stone base had shattered into pieces. 3 imported cedar shrubs were crushed underneath it. There were tire marks across the landscaping and broken irrigation pipes sticking out of the dirt. Attached beneath the photos was an invoice from facilities estimating the repairs at $4,600. Then came the line that made me read it twice. Based on witness statements and vehicle access records, your vehicle is believed responsible for the damage. Witness statements? Vehicle records? I actually laughed for a second because I thought someone had mixed up employee IDs. Then I noticed the legal language at the bottom, demanding immediate reimbursement within 72 hours or the company would pursue civil action. My phone started buzzing before I could even finish reading. My supervisor at the contracting company called first. "Ethan, tell me this is a mistake." I told him it had to be because Tuesday morning, the time they claimed the accident happened, I wasn't even on campus. I had spent nearly 3 hours at a client site across town upgrading security software for another business. My truck, or rather my old sedan, hadn't been anywhere near that planter. "Can you prove it?" he asked. I looked over at the wall of monitors inside my office, then over at the server rack quietly humming beside them, and finally back at the email. That's when something clicked. The entire parking system, every camera covering every entrance, every lane, every parking aisle. I designed most of it. I maintained all of it. More importantly, I knew exactly what those cameras had recorded that morning. I leaned back in my chair, took one slow breath, and smiled for the first time since opening the email. Whoever had written that accusation had made one very expensive mistake. They assumed the quiet contractor would panic before checking the evidence. They forgot I was the evidence. The first thing I did was lock my office door, not because I was worried someone would come after me, but because I knew distractions were the last thing I needed. When you're responsible for security systems, emotions are expensive. Evidence isn't. I logged into the server, opened the archive from Tuesday morning, and started with camera 1 covering the executive entrance. Nothing. Camera 2 showed traffic flowing normally. Camera 3 caught employees walking in with coffee cups, backpacks, earbuds, the usual morning rush. Then camera 4 loaded, and there it was. I actually leaned closer to the monitor because I couldn't believe how clean the footage was. At exactly 8:43 that morning, Brandon's white luxury sedan rolled into the executive lot a little faster than usual. He wasn't looking ahead. His head kept turning toward his driver's side mirror while he was trying to squeeze into the narrow space closest to the building. I watched him cut the steering wheel too sharply, the rear quarter panel clipping the corner of the massive concrete planter with a loud impact I couldn't hear but could almost feel through the screen. The planter shifted, cracked along its base, then collapsed forward, crushing the cedar shrubs beneath it. Brandon froze. For maybe 4 seconds he just sat there staring through the windshield. Then he opened his door, stepped out, looked around to see if anyone had witnessed it, kicked one of the broken concrete pieces back toward the flower bed like that somehow fixed the situation, climbed back into the car, and drove away. No phone call, no report, no conversation with facilities. Just gone. I sat there blinking at the screen before saying out loud to an empty room, "You've got to be kidding me." I pulled camera 5 to verify another angle. Same collision. Camera 6 showed his license plate perfectly as he exited the frame. Then I checked the entrance cameras. My old Ford hadn't entered the property until nearly 3 hours later. In fact, the access logs showed something even better. At the exact time Brandon hit the planter, my contractor badge had already been scanned into another client's building almost 15 miles away. Between the GPS history on my phone, the client sign-in sheet, and the invoices automatically timestamped through our service software, I had enough proof to convince any reasonable person. The only question left was why Brandon had waited 2 full days before pointing the finger at me. That answer came quicker than I expected. I pulled the facility's incident report from the internal database. At 9:12 that same morning, Brandon had submitted an electronic damage report. I read every word carefully. Decorative planter discovered damaged upon arrival. Responsible party unknown. Unknown. I read that sentence 3 times. If he truly believed I had done it, why didn't he write my name that morning? Why wait 48 hours? Then it hit me. Facilities had probably reviewed access records looking for nearby contractor vehicles because contractors were easier targets than executives. Somewhere during that conversation, Brandon realized he could redirect the blame before anyone checked the cameras. Maybe he assumed nobody would bother. Maybe he forgot who maintained them. Either way, he had just dug himself into a much deeper hole than a broken flower bed. Around 2 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time it was Melissa from Human Resources. Her voice was unusually careful, almost rehearsed. "Ethan, I understand this situation is stressful. If there's anything you'd like to share before legal proceeds," I interrupted politely. "Melissa, has anyone reviewed the security footage?" There was silence. "I don't believe so." "Interesting," I replied. "Because I have." Another pause. "Would you be willing to send us whatever you found?" "Absolutely." I didn't sound angry. That was intentional. Calm people with evidence are terrifying. I exported synchronized footage from all 6 cameras in high definition, attached still images showing Brandon's vehicle striking the planter, highlighted timestamps, included the access control logs, GPS records from my work phone, and my signed client work order proving I had been across town. Then I wrote exactly 3 sentences in the email. Attached is the complete video record from the incident. The footage clearly identifies the vehicle responsible and confirms I was not present. Please direct any future legal correspondence toward the individual shown in the recording. I copied everyone who had been copied on the accusation. CEO, legal, HR, facilities, Brandon. Then I hit send. I barely had time to refill my coffee before Brandon himself stormed into the security office. He didn't knock. He shoved the door open so hard it bounced off the stopper. "What the hell did you send?" he snapped. I looked up from my desk. "Evidence," You edited those videos. I couldn't help smiling. Really? I know enough about technology to recognize manipulated footage. Do you? He stepped closer, pointing a finger at me. You think because you run cameras you can fabricate whatever you want? I folded my hands on the desk. Brandon, every recording has redundant storage, synchronized timestamps, cryptographic file verification, and automatic cloud replication. His expression changed ever so slightly. You have backups? 3 of them. Delete them. I honestly thought I had misheard him. Excuse me, delete the copies and we can settle this quietly. That was the moment I realized this wasn't panic. It was entitlement. He genuinely believed rules applied differently to people like him. I leaned back and said, I'm a licensed security contractor. Destroying evidence would end my career. He stared at me for another few seconds before muttering, You'll regret this. Then he walked out. The funny thing was, for the first time all week, I wasn't worried anymore. People only threaten you when facts stop working in their favor. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Brandon's personal attorney accusing me of defamation, unlawful surveillance, evidence manipulation, and reputational harm. Reading it almost felt surreal. They demanded I immediately retract my statements, destroy all copies of the recordings, and issue a written apology. I forwarded the email directly to my attorney, a former prosecutor named Daniel Harper who had represented contractors in commercial disputes for years. 10 minutes later, he called actually laughing. Ethan, he said between chuckles, this might be one of the dumbest legal threats I've seen this year. Should I be worried? Not unless gravity suddenly stops working. By that afternoon, Daniel had drafted a response that was somehow polite and devastating at the same time. Instead of arguing emotionally, he simply listed facts. Brandon's original incident report identifying no suspect, 6 synchronized camera angles, original metadata, GPS verification, client attendance records, cloud integrity logs. Then came the part that made me grin. Because Brandon had filed a false damage accusation that resulted in unnecessary legal expenses, my contractor agreement allowed recovery of attorney consultation fees. Daniel added another $2,200 to the invoice. Facilities also recalculated the landscaping damage using outside contractor pricing plus emergency repair surcharges. Suddenly, Brandon wasn't demanding $5,000 from me anymore. He was looking at a bill approaching $8,000 himself. The atmosphere around the office changed almost overnight. Employees who normally avoided eye contact started giving me curious looks. Security guards whispered whenever Brandon walked past. Facilities technicians stopped joking around whenever his name came up. Nobody knew every detail yet, but rumors spread through office buildings faster than Wi-Fi. By Thursday afternoon, the CEO's executive assistant called. Mr. Brooks, the CEO has scheduled an emergency leadership meeting tomorrow morning. Legal has requested your attendance. I thanked her, hung up, and sat quietly for a minute. 7 days earlier, I was just the contractor nobody noticed. Tomorrow morning, I'd be walking into the boardroom carrying the evidence that could destroy one executive's credibility forever. I wasn't excited. I wasn't nervous anymore either. Mostly, I was curious. Because once the truth enters a room full of powerful people, you find out very quickly who values justice and who only values appearances. When I walked into the executive conference room Friday morning, it felt strangely ordinary. Same polished walnut table, same expensive coffee that somehow always tasted burned, same city skyline stretching across the windows. The only difference was the silence. Usually those meetings started with people talking over each other before the CEO arrived. But this time, nobody seemed interested in making small talk. Brandon sat halfway down the table wearing the same confident expression I'd seen 100 times before, except now it looked forced. He smiled at a couple of executives, but nobody smiled back. The company's general counsel nodded for me to take a seat near the presentation screen. Thank you for coming, Ethan, she said. We'd like to review the evidence together. Brandon immediately leaned forward. Before we begin, I'd like to formally object to the use of manipulated recordings. The CEO looked at him without saying a word, then turned toward legal. Play the video. The room went dark as the first camera angle appeared. Brandon's luxury sedan entered the executive parking area. The timestamp sat quietly in the corner of the screen. Nobody spoke. The second angle showed him turning into the parking space too sharply. The third angle captured the exact instant the rear of his car slammed into the concrete planter. You could actually see fragments of stone flying across the sidewalk. Then came the fourth angle, the one that made the entire room freeze. Brandon stepped out of the vehicle, looked around carefully, nudged broken concrete back toward the flower bed with a shoe, got back inside his car, and drove away. Someone quietly exhaled across the table. The legal director paused the footage before opening another document on the screen. "This," she said calmly, "is the incident report submitted by Mr. Pierce 25 minutes later." She highlighted the sentence describing the responsible party as unknown. Then another document appeared beside it. It was the email accusing me 2 days later. "Can anyone explain why the responsible party was initially listed as unknown before becoming Mr. Brooks 48 hours later?" Nobody answered. Brandon cleared his throat. I was confused about the timeline. The CEO finally spoke. "Confused enough to threaten legal action against an innocent contractor?" Brandon opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried one last time. The footage could still have been altered. I almost felt sorry for him because the legal director immediately switched to another slide showing digital verification reports, server logs, metadata authentication, cloud replication records, and independent integrity checks. "These recordings were verified by 2 outside forensic specialists yesterday evening," she said. "There was no evidence of editing." Brandon slowly leaned back into his chair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked like someone who realized confidence couldn't negotiate with reality. Human Resources spoke next. They reviewed the company's false reporting policy, then explained how filing an inaccurate damage claim while concealing direct involvement could expose both the company and its insurance carrier to unnecessary liability. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. Sometimes quiet disappointment is louder than shouting. The meeting ended less dramatically than people might imagine. There wasn't some movie scene where security escorted Brandon out in handcuffs or where everyone applauded because the truth had won. Real life usually isn't that theatrical. The CEO simply announced that the matter would proceed through internal disciplinary procedures and thanked everyone for their cooperation. We all stood, collected our folders, and walked out. About an hour later, I was back in my office reviewing maintenance requests when someone knocked softly on the open door. Brandon stood there holding a cashier's check. His shoulders looked lower somehow. He avoided eye contact as he placed the envelope on my desk. "This covers the damages, your legal fees, everything," he muttered. I looked inside. $7,800. Exactly what facilities and my attorney had calculated. "You know," I said quietly, "if you had reported the accident Tuesday morning, this probably would have been a routine insurance claim." He stared at the floor for a second before answering. "I know." Then he turned around and walked away without another word. That was the last real conversation we ever had. Within a few weeks, he was gone from the company. Officially, nobody discussed personnel decisions. Unofficially, people drew their own conclusions. The interesting part wasn't what happened to Brandon. It was what happened afterward. The CEO asked me with me privately the following Monday. He thanked me for remaining professional throughout the entire situation, then admitted something that surprised me. "Our biggest mistake wasn't believing the wrong person," he said. "It was assuming the quietest person in the room had the least credibility." Before I left his office, they offered a renewed multi-year contract with a significant increase in compensation, along with expanded authority to independently audit parking incidents, review vehicle damage claims, and approve evidence before any legal demand involving contractors could be issued. In other words, they built an entire process around making sure this could never happen again. Looking back now, I don't think that week changed me because someone finally apologized or because I ended up with a better contract. It changed me because it reminded me how quickly people can judge someone based on status instead of facts. My old Ford Fusion still sat in the contractor parking lot every morning after that. The paint didn't magically become shiny. The cracked taillight didn't repair itself overnight. I was still the same guy fixing cameras before sunrise. The only difference was that people started saying good morning when they walked past. Funny how respect often arrives after evidence instead of before it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if those cameras hadn't existed, if I hadn't insisted on redundant backups years earlier, or if fear had convinced me to quietly pay the money just to make the problem disappear. Maybe that's exactly what Brandon expected. Maybe that's why he picked the contractor instead of another executive. I honestly don't know. What I do know is this: power can shape opinions for a while, titles can intimidate people for a while, and money can delay the truth for a while, but documented facts have a way of outlasting all of them. Now I'm curious what you think. If you had been in my position, would you have quietly settled just to avoid the stress? Or would you have fought back even knowing the entire executive team seemed convinced you were guilty? And if you were sitting in that boardroom, do you think Brandon deserved a second chance after admitting what he did, or was losing his position the only fair outcome? Let me know in the comments because stories like this always spark strong opinions. And honestly, I'd love to hear where you stand.